All right, it's cricket time now on the SportsMax Zone, and the West Indies will be hunting a bounce-back win when they face Sri Lanka in the second of 3 one-day internationals in Pallekele on Wednesday. This as the Caribbean side fell to a 5-wicket loss via the Duckworth-Lewis-Stern method in the rain-affected first ODI on Sunday. A 78-ball, 85-run, unbroken 5th wicket stand between Sherfin Rutherford, 74, and Roston Chase, 33, temporarily threatened a rescue act for the Caribbean side, who had slipped to 100 for 4 in 25.3 overs after electing to bat. The pair had taken the visitors to 185 for 4 when the rain came in the 39th over. Pursuing a revised target of 232 in 37 overs, Sri Lanka showed intent throughout their innings, eventually securing the win on the back of player of the match Charis Asalanka's 77 and opener Nishan Madushka's 69 at 234 for 5 in 31.5 overs. While scores in the match, West Indies 185 for 4, Sri Lanka 234 for 5. Well, the West Indies skipper, Shai Hope, assessed his team's performance in Game 1 while looking ahead to the second encounter.
I think our lines and lengths have to be better depending on whichever surface we're playing on. I think regardless of if it's wet or not, we got to make sure our lines and lengths are a lot better as a bowling group. And then when we're batting, I think we need to show a bit more intent. So I think those are the key areas that we need to focus on going into the next game. We know that their main threat would be the spin. Obviously, we got to look at the power play. We need to see how we need to attack the power play. And then how we're going to attack their spinners, put them under pressure in some way. If we got to play different shots, if we got to look at different scoring areas, push a little bit harder to make them think. If we just allow them to set and bowl, then they're going to be all over us. So as a team, as a batting group, we got to ensure we put a lot more pressure on their bowlers so we can give ourselves the best chance to get big scores on the board.
All right, cricket commentator Fazir Mohammed, he joins us via Zoom. Good afternoon, Faz. How are you?
Not too bad at all.
Yeah, it's been a while. So happy to have you back on the show.
Good to be back.
Yeah, so let's start by talking about what the skipper said, Shai Hope. He spoke about working on the line and length as they get ready for the second ODI, right, Faz? And I was looking at the stats earlier today, and between the 10th and 20th over in a report, they highlighted that, of course, you know, only 2 of the overs didn't have boundaries, which is a massive problem because that's where now Sri Lanka scored most of their runs. So what do you make of, you know, how our bowlers went about their duties in the first ODI?
There are a number of variables there. I think the key one was the weather. And it's not about making excuses. It's a reality. And in fact, even the Sri Lankan team acknowledged it, that the way the weather turned out was very much in favor of Sri Lanka because you had that partnership, as you mentioned, building nicely between Rutherford and Chase, 85 unbroken at the time. They could have got out next over. They could have added another 70 runs. You don't know. It's mere speculation. But then, with the amount of rain that fell, it made it very difficult for the bowlers. So obviously, in a situation like that, and that Pallekele area is an area of Sri Lanka, the Central Highlands, where you generally expect a lot of rain. When the rain falls, the ground doesn't drain particularly well, so the gutterings would have a lot of water in it. So that contributed to the problem. It's not about making excuses, it's about facing that reality. And I'm sure both teams will be hoping that the toss doesn't become a key factor tomorrow morning, our time, based on the anticipation of more rain. But in reference to your specific question about the bowling, yes, it's a situation where you can't be giving up so many 4 balls. But again, it could be argued that, look, the ball's so greasy, every time it goes into the outfield, it's soaked again. So it's very difficult in that situation. And therefore, everything was stacked in favor of Sri Lanka's batting, given the prevailing conditions.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Faz, because even when I think about the momentum, when the rain comes into play, it does affect a team's momentum. And I felt like I saw that on the players' expressions and just the way they went about playing the game after the rain came and stopped them. So that's a good point. I also take that similar point. Now, Gudakesh Moti, he was brilliant for me. I feel as if I'm looking at him match after match, and he continues to grow as a player. He was a pick of the bowler with 3 for 47. What did you make of him?
Well, I think what we've seen from Moti over the last couple of years, you might recall that he got his opportunity at senior international level in 2022, played one test match, and then was dropped for the second against Bangladesh. And then that seemed to be a common experience until he went to Zimbabwe, picked up 13 wickets in that test match. And then in helpful conditions in the Caribbean, he really excelled in the white ball formats. And now we're seeing someone who's very much a confident cricketer. You see it with his batting as well, which is continuing to improve. So he is someone who is of value to the West Indies across all three formats of the game. And therefore, in those conditions, where the ball is greasy, where it's difficult to get a proper grip on the ball, and to be as successful as he was, just re-emphasizes how much he's developing as an all-format cricketer at the highest level of the game.
Yeah, and as you talk about him and, development, one of the things that Shea Hope also said in that interview that he did, and we showed a short while ago, was the fact that, he would like, and I'm moving to the batting department now, a lot of the batters to bat with intent. And I felt like there were a couple of partnerships that we got possible starts, and then that same word, momentum, was broken when we lost one of the batters.
Well, batting with intent is a nice phrase, but what does it mean? Batting with intent for your openers to go through the first 15 overs, for someone to take it to the end. Because if you look at the dismissals of the first two, where facing up to Hasaranga, the very first delivery, and playing across the line, you're asking for trouble. And then Alec Athenes running down the pitch to be stumped by a mile. Is that intent? And I understand the point that is being made about being positive, but also you have to not just play the conditions, but play the quality of the opposition. And that's where you need to be mindful of all these different elements. It's not T20, it's 50 overs per side. And therefore, it might sound old-fashioned to talk about playing something resembling a sheet anchor role, but it's similar, except that you've got to have a different pace to your game if you're going to be someone to hold the innings together at the top, rather than being 100 for 4 and therefore necessitating that revival, which involves some measure of consolidation and some time before you get the boundaries once again. It's about, again, understanding what do you mean by showing intent, because you can't go a boundary every ball from the very start of your innings. Likewise, you don't want to be blocking non-stop. It has to be both a medium that recognizes your own capabilities and the quality of the opposition as well.
Yeah, Faz, we're some way off the next 50 over World Cup, 2027 in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Namibia, I think, hosting the next World Cup. So there is time to get our house in order. But currently ranked 10th in the world in ODI cricket, the West Indies, Faz. Very, very troubling based on our form and the trajectory as we start to prepare for another 50 over World Cup, or set the platform to prepare for another 50 over World Cup.
Lance, I mean, it's not a nice thing to say, but West Indies are in the one-day wilderness. We haven't qualified for the last two Champions Trophy tournaments.
Yes.
The last one was in 2017. We're not going to be in the Champions Trophy tournament in Pakistan early next year. For the first time ever, we didn't qualify for a 50 over World Cup. And everyone is saying, well, it should be automatic this time around. Well, not necessarily so, because there's 14 teams, yes. But as you just mentioned, 3 of those teams will be co-hosts of the World Cup. And as you mentioned, the lowly ranking right now, it's important for the West Indies to start getting some points, because obviously the other challengers, those who would normally be considered minnows, will be saying, look, the West Indies are easy prey these days. It was Scotland that knocked the West Indies officially out of the last World Cup with the victory in Zimbabwe in the qualifying tournament. So all of these elements will tell you that, yes, there might be time available to 2027, but the West Indies can't afford to take it easy at this stage. They must look at every match, whether it's this series, the upcoming one against England, the one against Bangladesh, which also features a couple of test matches. They have to be thinking of some clear pathway forward. And even if you're going to have a situation as now, where certain key players make themselves unavailable for different reasons, you have to have other players who are immediate alternates, if not at the same level of excellence, but certainly with a level of competence that makes you feel that they can win a match for you every now and then.
Yeah, and what would you point to, Faz, as the critical problem with the 50-over game for the West Indies? Because Darren Sammy is the white ball coach, and I know a 50-over game is twice as long as a T20 game, more than twice as long. But in our T20 game, there are signs that they have the confidence and the talent to match the best teams in the world. So what specifically is your assessment of what's going wrong with the ODI game?
Well, I'm glad you framed it that way, Lance, because really, if you think about it, the longer the game gets, the longer a track event gets, tactics come into it. Timing, awareness, pacing yourself, mindful of where you want to be in the chasing pack and all of those sorts of things. So the longer it gets, you therefore then have to take into consideration all of those variables. And it speaks to the shortcomings as far as temperament, not about necessarily technique, not about ability, but it's about that awareness of, look, yes, it's 50 overs, but you can't start too slowly. But by the same token, you can't be reckless about it. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And therefore, while you would like to see the West Indies probably be more positive, like in England or in Australia or so many other teams, they have to measure that against the competence and the quality of the players they have available. And yes, we see that ability. But when you see, as I mentioned, the two openers in the last game, the manner in which they got out, when you would really want to see them carry on and provide a bit of the foundation to a formidable total, whatever happens with the rain, you can't do anything about it. I think that speaks to a level of awareness of the situation, and therefore tactics and temperament and understanding where you are in the course of an innings becomes very important.
Yeah, Faz, well, we're looking ahead to the second ODI. Do you expect any major changes with the team?
I don't necessarily expect changes because, I mean, the rain was such a key contributor, and I think it's only fair that you give players a decent opportunity to prove themselves one way or the other. Because, again, as I said, we are in the wilderness. It's a situation where the West Indies are on the outside looking in. And therefore, it's about taking advantage of these opportunities, the many white ball opportunities that are coming up, to really find those cricketers who might be there already, but need to have their minds tweaked a bit to understand what is required and put pressure on them to understand that this is not a favor to you to play for the West Indies. This is a privilege. Whether it's a bilateral tournament or a major tournament, it's a privilege, and therefore you need to play the game to appreciate the privilege of playing for the West Indies.
Yeah, well, Faz, we definitely appreciate you chatting with us on the SportsMax Zone, and we'll talk again really soon.
Take care.
Fazir Mohammed there, of course, our cricket commentator. Love when Faz comes on the show and gives us his passionate analysis.
He's a top man,
Yeah, Lance always says that. It's break time here on the SportsMax Zone. We'll come back with Interactive.